Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this edition of Give and Go Live. My name's David Newberry, and I'm joined by my colleague Ian Barker. Hello, Ian.
Greetings from Kansas City.
And Ian, we have a special guest today. We have Ellis Riley, who is the assistant women's coach at Hastings College in Nebraska. Welcome, Ellis, to this presentation.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And the topic today, Ellis, that you have submitted is first in a series of 3 activities called Combining to Transition Activity, and this is activity 1. As always, I will describe what we see in the first sequence, the setup, and then we'll hand over to Ellis to talk a little bit about the methodology. So in this activity here, Ellis, we have 2 teams, 1 blue and of course 1 red. Each team has a ball, and as we can see here with the reds, they're making a combination between their 5 players. Once they've passed the ball, the idea and objective is to move. At the same time, the blue team are doing exactly the same. You'll notice we do have 2 end zones that currently aren't in play at either end of the area. That are approximately 5 yards to 6 yards in length. And of course, the size of the area will just depend on the objectives of the session and also the age group you're coaching. So Ellis, please talk to us a little bit about some of the methods on activity 1, sequence 1.
Yeah, so essentially what we're looking for here is we're just looking for both teams to generate as much width and depth and movement within the grid as possible. They're going to do this essentially via passing and moving within the space, with the objective of essentially avoiding one another's teams while maintaining good possession and good tempo of the ball. So as you can see with the arrows that are already defined there, red and blue will be moving the ball in a variety of different ways with the objective of moving within and through one another around the grid. So very imperative that the eyes are up, that space is being found as quickly and as often as possible, and that communication's nice and clear.
So Ian, a real simple setup to begin with. Talk about some of the complications and the challenges we might be able to see here just in a very simple first sequence.
Sure. So I think it's critical and important that these end zones have been set up by the coach in advance. So even though we're not using them in this first activity, we're ready to flow into the next activity right away. So I really like that component of it. Another interesting feature here is sometimes as coaches, we put the 2 groups of 5 in their own area. So it's 5v nobody in their own area. But this notion of red players running through blue players and vice versa, I think is really, really interesting. And then finally, we all know sometimes with youth players, we tell them to move, but they aren't quite sure what the consequence of movement is. So one of the things I might do here is I might say, okay, if you're the player that's played the ball, as soon as you've passed it, you've got to move 2 or 3 steps quicker than you were before. And so you find some little way to incite the movement with just some verbal command.
So sequence number 2, now we've added some direction. So we'll follow the red passing sequence here. So we ended up with the player on the ball passing inside and receiving a return pass. And now we've introduced the 3rd man running, the player off the ball that is looking to get into the end zone and receive the ball as it enters into the end zone. So Ellis, let's talk about what you see here from a method perspective.
Yep. So I think it's a little bit more of a cognitive challenge is this one, because now we're looking for the players to essentially make these runs into the end zone from potentially deeper situations or deeper areas within the grid. Can we also look for players to potentially move around the back here on those angles, and potentially also down the line on these angles and maybe a little wider? So what we're wanting the players to do here is communicate clearly on and off the ball. They've got to use their eyes as quite a visual cue in this exercise, as they've got to be able to see and find the space as quickly as possible to receive the ball and move the ball. And again, it's between and through traffic. So like Ian just mentioned on the previous slide there, it's unopposed, but it's certainly got that game realistic feel as they're both trying to go to opposite end zones, playing through one another.
Thanks, Ellis. Yes, direction is certainly a big component and an added method that we've added here, Ian. What else do you see?
Yeah, I think this is a great progression because we've added the direction. So we might not be explicit with the players with this, but as coaches, we should have the idea that that is the penetrating pass. The penetrating pass has been established by a small passing and movement sequence here, which would be pass and support. And then this player has moved off the ball, so he's demonstrated width and mobility to receive, again, the penetrating pass. So very quickly, we've got all of our principles of attacking play, or most of our principles of attacking play, in a nice, straightforward 5v nobody with direction.
And our last sequence, we've now followed the track of the blue team, and the blue team here, slightly more simple combination, but equally effective. We have a player that has passed inside, and possibly a central midfield player has then played a penetrating pass, not to the inside as we did last time, but this time to the outside of the red player for a teammate that's made an overlapping run around the player that eventually passes the ball. So Ellis, let's talk about methods on this final slide.
Yep. Again, movement and communication is very imperative on and off the ball here. I think the cues that the players are looking for within one another are the visual, the gesturing. Maybe the player's got their hand up to signal where they want the ball to, or maybe they're breaking a line with a run and they're signaling that they want the ball played through. And for example, here with the red team, the ball's being played in here. See, and then it could be played off here at this angle, and then we may be playing a long ball through to this player into the end zone who may be making the movement through. So I would give here the 6 second limit just to kind of push the tempo a little bit, make it a little more game realistic. And like I say, in this case, the ball may have come in at the red arrow, dropped back to the player who's played that long ball through for the highest player to make the run. So just really focusing on the small details here of the communication, the cues that we see on and off the ball. And again, we're playing through traffic. So blue and red have got to work quite quickly and diligently to keep the tempo and the possession clean within the grid.
One question, Ellis, just for clarification. Previously, we had the Reds coming into this end zone. In this new sequence, are they now reversing the direction and going to the other end zone?
Right now in this sequence, teams can go to any end zone that they like. So we can have them going through traffic both ways. We could have them go in the opposite directions in this case right now. It's very open in the sense that the players have got that choice. But as soon as they do get into an end zone, they must transition and go another direction as soon as possible.
Okay. Ian, any final comments on this final sequence?
Yeah, so hopefully the coaches are really appreciating that this is a good 10, 15 minutes at the beginning of training, the 5v nobody and then 5v nobody with direction, but using the two balls. So we could make it exclusively one direction for one team and one direction for the other, as I think you were alluding to, David. But equally, we can make it kind of a make it, take it. So both teams go both ways and they're working through each other. That's very much a coach's choice. What I like here, and Ellis talked about, if we look at where this young player has received the ball, but where their run started from, this would be an example of what I might call non-verbal communication. That is to say, as the player has made this aggressive curling run into the space, he has indicated to his teammate that that's where he wants to receive the ball. So sometimes we do it, again, with a visual gesture, and we make we raise our hand and we also call for the ball. But sometimes just simply movement will incite a pass. And I think that's possible interpretation as we look at this one.
Just one thing to mention on methodology and direction. I think that one might want to make it one direction if we're talking about functional responsibilities, meaning if this player on the right-hand side is your right back and this player here is your centre back and this player over here may be your left midfield player, if we're going in this direction, they're playing in their functional roles. However, if we change direction, of course, now this left-sided player is now playing on the right. So that's one reason why we may want to ensure that we go in one direction. If we do, as I'm sure Ellis will agree, we can put balls around the outside. So instead of them having to grab the ball that they've just placed into the end zone and then recycling that, we might be able to go in the other direction. So that's one thing just to consider from one direction. Ellis, any final comments? Yeah, no, definitely. As you just alluded to there, the directional focus in terms of the functional unit of play is very important. And in this instance, I think both either one direction for each team or kind of both directions for each team is fine. And hopefully as we progress, you'll see that we can really focus on it being one-directional and dimensional as we move forward. Well, thanks very much, Ellis and Ian, for your time, and thanks, coaches, for joining this edition of Give and Go Live.